Welcome to the Huntington Way Show, where we help parents navigate the educational maze. I'm your host, Yvonne Strachan, author and founder of InspirationalHomeschooling.com. I'm speaking with Elizabeth Ross, and she holds a master's degree in counseling. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a licensed professional counselor. We are discussing children's mental health. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors, the Huntington Learning Center and Inspirational Homeschooling, for bringing the show to you. You're listening on Power Talk 1040 AM, 98.5 FM, and 95.7 FM. Please like and subscribe to Power Talk 1040 on YouTube. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I know you have so much great information to share, and I know it's going to be so helpful to parents and to kids. So let's start with what kind of training and credentials that you have. Can you share that?
Sure, I was in public education for 25 and a half years. About half of that was actually as an educator, and half of it was a school counselor. And it was through the school counseling that I grew a passion to become a professional counselor. And so as you said, a licensed professional counselor, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I hold a master's certification in the Splunk work that I do.
Yeah, it's amazing the work that you do. What can parents do to help improve their children's mental health?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I think that one of the things we're experiencing is a greater degree of anxiety and depression
Hmm.
having come out of the pandemic, that there was already a trend being set for children and teenagers. And our suicide rate, especially in Colorado Springs, is exceedingly high in El Paso County.
Oh,
And so the pandemic, of course, did not help any of that. It kind of exacerbated all of that. One of the things that I feel is one of the greater contributors to the mental health crisis is that our parents have kind of been hijacked by the mental health profession, of all things.
mm-hmm.
So I think that it has mental health professionals have decided that they know more about parenting than what people can learn through God and through the Bible, and that there's only been one perfect parent, and that was God. And so
Yeah.
He does give instructions to us, and we are not necessarily operating under that authority.
Mm.
And I think one significant issue is that parents have really not taken absolute authority over their homes. In my practice and some of the things that I come across, I found that children are now have more authority in the home than the parents do.
Mm.
Like what they say goes,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I think that's one issue that is really significant in uh, developing the mental health of our children and them feeling stable and secure. I believe also that we have kind of gone away from really allowing our children to experience failure and
Mm.
stress.
Hmm.
Like they don't learn resilience and they don't learn how to do that if we're always protecting them and keeping them um, where they're not able to experience that.
Mm.
Another factor I think that is really important is I think there's a lot of performance anxiety. Children, like their parents now, are expected to live extremely busy lives. So they go from one activity to another, and they're expected to perform well.
Mm.
So I think they become very afraid to fail. And so it creates a pretty high level of anxiety, I believe. And then also, unfortunately, we have a lot of absent fathers and single parent families now and blended families, and those things all contribute to the mental health of a child.
Yeah, I can see, boy, those are a lot of really big points. And, you know, we always wonder as parents, how can we help? How can we heal from these difficulties?
Well, I think one of the things I would like to say about that is that we've also gone from the marriage being one of the more important the most important relationship in a family
Mm-hmm.
because the parents are what provide the security and stability for their children.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're not operating as a couple and that's not the priority relationship, the children become very insecure and unstable, and they're not provided with a secure base. So, the secure base for children is one of the most important factors involved in how well they do. Because if they have a secure base, a secure home to come home to, then no matter what else they experience, they always have that.
Yeah.
But when they're trying to figure out like what's going on here and am I really secure because maybe my parents aren't secure or confident in what they're doing, then it just creates a lot of instability and a lot of insecurity in the children.
Yeah. So a lot of these points that you're making, it sounds like there's a lot of pressures
Hmm.
on the kids. And then if they don't have stability, and I've experienced that, I mean, it's if you don't have a sure footing, if you um, don't really have something solid to rely on, and that's where the Bible comes in. I mean, that's unchanging. It's
Right,
never changing, unlike society that's always
right.
changing. Yeah, for sure.
I think that's where you have to find the truth, and that's where you have to really fall back on for the parenting skills. And there's a few other things, if that's okay,
Oh
that
yeah.
I share around that. One is I think that we're really lacking in teaching our children critical thinking.
Mm,
And the schools have really gone away from that. We used to rely on the schools a lot to help with that. So parents have to step up even more to teach their children how to critically think, meaning that when they come across conflict and problems and issues, whether it's at home with siblings or away at school or wherever they might be, kind of as the parent helping them walk through how do we handle this? How do
hmm
you handle this? What do you need to do? What do you think would be a good way to resolve this problem? So that you're teaching them how to think it through. And I think even saying, what are the Bible's answers to this question? Like, what are we told about how we're supposed to respond in certain circumstances? Because once we direct them back to the Bible when they're trying to think things through, then that's where they're going to look
Yeah,
as they grow up and as they're an adult as well.
yeah, and that makes sense because as parents, we're not going to always be there, but that Bible is a tool that they can turn to at any point in life. So
Right.
you're giving them that solid foundation on which to make decisions and critically think through things. And so, even, as a homeschooling parent, I think about how we go through some of the different, science and history and things like that. And if you are using a Christian curriculum that literally has that critical thinking built in, and then relating everything to the Bible, that also points them to the Bible and to God's word through everything in life. It's telling them that, hey, this applies to anything that happens to you from when you wake up to when you sleep. And so that's very helpful. Um, so we're getting pretty close to the end of time. So
Okay.
when we come back, I want to talk about this. According to a recent survey by the Pew Research Center, 4 in 10 U.S. parents with younger children um, that are under 18 say they are worried that their children might struggle with anxiety or depression. And in the 10 years leading up to the pandemic, feelings of persistent sadness and hopelessness, like Elizabeth shared, as well as suicidal thoughts and behaviors, increased by 40% among young people, according to the CDC. So when we come back, we're going to talk about this more. Welcome back to the Huntington Way Show. You're listening on Power Talk 1040 AM, 98.5 FM, and 95.7 FM. I'm here with Elizabeth Ross, and we're talking about children's mental health. Elizabeth, what are some warning signs parents can look for to help them recognize if their child is having a hard time dealing with any issues?
I think one of the things is that it's extremely important to really be in tune with your child,
Hmm.
meaning, first of all, probably you have to be in tune with God and yourself in order to do that. So when you are, I think that you will recognize significant behavior changes. And when you recognize those, then you need to explore what's going on. And by those, I mean things like isolation, irritability, anger, emotional outbursts, things that are not typical of your child's behavior.
Hmm.
And hopefully you know each child individually and you're tracking with that child as an individual. Like not all children are going to be treated exactly the same.
Right.
And so I think that it's as you do that, then when you notice those signs, then it's time to just dig in a little bit and find out what that's all about. One of the things I do want to say is that oftentimes you will see anxiety develop around 9 or 10 years old. And what I've discovered about that is that there has been some significant trauma that has happened pre-conscious memory.
Hmm.
And so oftentimes parents aren't aware that maybe birth trauma
Hmm.
can lead to stress and anxiety as the child develops. So they get in stressful situations and it's triggering some previous trauma that's not in their memory, and their parents aren't necessarily giving much credence to the fact that it might impact them now.
Hmm.
And so there's this anxiety developing. So I think it's really important to look back and think about that so that you're just in tune with maybe there is something deeper involved in that anxiety.
Yeah. Wow. So that is a really good point. And I thought too, I was just thinking about one of my children, and I was like, I remember there was a time a couple years ago when my daughter was just like, she'd wake up, but then she would just kind of like lay down and not really be interested in engaging like normal. And sometimes when you're like right there facing something every day, you don't always recognize it. But when you have two parents in the home, sometimes the other parent will recognize.
Good
And
point. Yes.
yes,
Mhm.
and my husband was like, there's something going on. We need to figure this out and have a conversation. And then you can get to the bottom of what is going on. And being really in tune to your children and the way they are, and then any changes, that point there is just so huge. So I just want to make sure that the audience is really paying attention to that, the individual children, and then the changes in them, and then addressing it. And sometimes seeking other people's input, even a sibling's input, is like, well, what do I've noticed some changes. What do
Mhm.
you think might be going on? Or what are your thoughts? Sometimes that could help. I don't know if that might
Well,
even just an outside perspective. Yeah.
sure. I think even grandparents can,
Hmm.
if they're around the children
Hmm.
and spend a fair amount of time with them, they also might notice changes.
Yeah, yeah. So that's just such a good point. So if a parent recognizes any of these signs, what can they do to help their child?
I think it's important to invite conversation, but again, I think that starts when they're itty bitty.
Hmm.
So a lot of times when you have that 2-year old kind of tugging at your leg and wanting to talk and want you to hear them, and you go, yeah, yeah, okay, in a minute, or you're listening, but you're not listening.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're actually starting to do is teach your child that you're not really listening.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to start early. And sometimes it's not convenient. And sometimes you have to say, okay, I hear you. I know you want to talk. Just give me a few minutes and then we'll talk. But you're setting the groundwork when they're really little. And I think it's important for people to know that. And then you provide that safe space. And so if they know that you're going to listen, they'll be willing to speak.
Mm-hmm.
With younger children, you need to meet children where they are. So young children, you can meet them in their play. You can observe their play. It's amazing the kinds of things that come out in a child's play.
Mm-hmm.
And if one is just willing to engage and to be aware and observe, I think with older children, you have to, again, know them, know where are they comfortable, where they're more relaxed, where would they be more willing to talk. For my son, it was always driving in the car.
Mm,
Like, I don't know why, but that was a great place for him to chat away.
yeah.
And so it might be that, it might be a coffee, an ice cream, taking a walk. I don't know, but I think knowing enough about them where you can uh, just hear their hearts and do really strong reflective listening. You can make statements that invite further conversation from them, like, so that was something that was very upsetting to you.
Mm,
Or you can ask open ended questions. So, how did you feel when that happened to you? So that you're not asking them a question that can give you a yes or no answer, because that's what you'll get.
oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, boy, so boy, that really hit, when you're saying, okay, pay attention, or, if you can't that second, like, just give me a minute. I'm going to, you know, I really want to hear what you have to say. You're very important to me. And that's really one of the messages that you
Hmm.
say. So that brings me to the thought of social media, phones, and how that tugs at parents, but then also at the kids. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, my idea on that is probably not very popular,
Well,
but I'm going to say it.
yeah.
I really don't think there's a place for smartphones with children.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that when they become teenagers, sometimes there's more of a need. But even at that, they should be highly monitored, and the children should know that you're monitoring them, and they should be open books with that device.
Hmm.
I think that all technology should be limited daily. And social media is interesting because it gives people, even adults, a very false sense that you're creating intimate relationship,
Hmm.
and you're not.
Yeah.
And then when people get together and try to talk, they don't even know what to say to each other. But they've expressed all these things through media that they think, oh, we're really close. And social media for teens and children just opens a door to such significant online bullying that is probably even worse than physical bullying.
Wow. And is that because there's not a lot of engagement back and then the facial expressions and everything, or it's easier for people to
Well,
bully at that point,
I,
or?
I think when people don't think as much about what they say
Mm,
because there's nobody else listening,
mm,
and it's really difficult what some teens, especially preteens, are experiencing in terms of online media and bullying through social media.
wow.
And it just invites a lot of um, opportunity for the wrong people to get in touch with your child's information and couch themselves as someone else that they're not. And
Now that's so true. And really, when a child has social media or any kind of technology, it's like inviting the public really right into your living room.
yeah.
I mean, that's really what it is, right?
Hmm.
um, So we talked a little bit about the Pew Research Center, the increase in depression and things like that. Do you think that the social media and the technology really has played a big part in that? Are you seeing that trend because of that? Is that kind of what you're thinking? Or do you think it's more like the parent, um, the dynamics of the family?
Well, there's nothing to substitute the dynamics of the family. I think that
Right.
that's the most important relationship a child experiences. Uh, the social media and the technology, however, um, actually exacerbate some issues like ADD, ADHD. It influences and prohibits a child's ability to focus a lot of times because of the intentional activity that sparks through all of the media that's going on. So it keeps your brain firing in a whole different kind of way. And that in itself can become addictive.
Oh, yeah. Well, when we come back, we're going to meet again and have another episode. We're going to talk a little bit more about getting some professional help and such. But I would love for you to share how people can find you.
Well, you can go to unificounseling.com, which is spelled YOUNIFY counseling.com. I'm there, and there's a couple of others, my colleagues that we all office in the same space, and there's Blanca practitioners as well. I, unfortunately, right now, it's very difficult to make appointments, but you know, when if there's an emergency or crisis, there's a fair chance I'm not going to be available myself, but the other people are. And I think also Focus on the Family is a fantastic resource because they vet therapists very thoroughly, and they're a great resource for finding help.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. This is Yvonne Strachan, today's host on the Huntington Way Show. Thank you for joining us.